So, what gets you up in the morning?
Coffee. There's an assumption that wood as a building material is a climate solution. But the fact is that wood is only as good as the forest practices that stand behind it. One way to think about it that can be helpful is to envision the forest as a bucket. The water in the bucket is the carbon that's stored in the forest. In an old-growth forest, you have a bucket and it's full. When you go in and log, no matter how lightly or intensively you log, you're punching holes in the bucket. And you have carbon that escapes, and the water level in the bucket falls. How far that water level falls depends on the intensity of the logging. So that's really fundamentally the dynamics. If you start with a full bucket and then you drop it down to a low level and then maintain it at that level, you've created a carbon debt, right? You've contributed to global warming. There was a study in the state of Oregon that found that logging relatively mature forests accounted for roughly 15 to 30% of their greenhouse gas emissions. And that's equivalent to between 2 and 4 million new cars on the road. Sometimes when you substitute wood for structural materials like steel, concrete, you are going to reduce the carbon footprint of that building. But if your goal is to minimize the carbon footprint of building materials, you shouldn't stop there. You should be going out and seeking wood from climate-smart forestry. There's two main competing forest certification systems in North America. One is called the Forest Stewardship Council, or FSC, and the other is called the Sustainable Forestry Initiative, or SFI. If we're talking about forest certification, about green labels for forest products, who are you going to trust more? One backed by major environmental groups, or one backed by big timber companies? If you fly over Western Washington, you'll see a lot of SFI certified forests, growing tree farms, monocultures, and cutting those trees on a short rotation. FSC standards are stricter. They require more trees to be left behind in the forest. Where there's clear cutting, the clear cuts have to be smaller and more widely distributed in the forest. It requires more protection of forests along stream sides. And FSC stands out for the diversity of its stakeholders and its balanced governance system, which includes forward-looking companies, environmental groups, and social interests like labor, indigenous peoples, and foresters. The biggest barriers to building professionals using climate-smart wood are cost and availability. Typically, it's important to look at options for sourcing climate-smart wood early in the building process. But if you are seeking out climate-smart wood, you're sending a very important signal to the supply base that there is desire, that there is demand for wood from these better practices, and that's going to improve availability over time. Typically, the premium for climate-smart wood is only 5 to 10%. We can have the lumber we need and healthy forests that refill the carbon bucket if we get this right. Help climate restoration by insisting on climate-smart lumber in your projects.